Good afternoon. Thanks for coming out. My name's Matt Crowe. I'm a technical account manager with Tanium, and I'm going to give a talk today about something that's been illuminated in my 1 year so far here with Tanium, but also throughout my career previous to that, around the fight that we have internally at all of our companies and our places of work that we work at. As I mentioned, I've been about 15 or 16 year veteran of security, live in the Detroit area there. And my early years, I did a lot of consulting and work for one of the big antivirus companies and worked on site, kind of managing and operating, designing a lot of equipment. And this was in the early 2000s. And so I don't know, those of you who are sort of near my age, which is in the early 40s and a little bit younger, may have recognized some of these wonderful pictures from your past when incident response was really loud, widespread, noisy. They didn't do damage. Some of them did do damage. They certainly weren't out for theft. Here's my particular favorite, the Melissa Love letter that some of you older folks in the room may remember very fondly. Yeah, I had to search the internet for this one. Yeah, I searched for mid-2000s viruses, and Google shot me this one. So these were widespread, aggressive, and noisy. And then, as we all know from this room now, this is no longer the case with threats that we face in the internet. Right? They're not noisy. They are can be widespread. It can be extremely damaging, and they are really aimed around cyber criminals and cyber theft type activities. So, what is the state of where we're at now? Again, showing my age. Those of you under 35 may not get any of the picture references in this entire presentation. I apologize for that. Look it up on Netflix. One of the best movies ever made, ever. So what are we now? What's happening right now in the industry? I took some time to look earlier this year at the Verizon breach report that came out. Anyone that hasn't looked at the Verizon breach report should go take a look at it. It's filled with incredible information, not just from a perspective of what's happening in the industry, but also some very detailed statistics that I think illuminates a lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts in people's minds when they actually take a look at them. So this one here is actually the time to compromise, and this percentage on the left that you see is actually the percentage of respondents that said it takes days or less. And the top is the time to compromise, and the bottom is the time to discover those compromises. So as anyone can see here, the slope of the top line, don't have to work back to your math degree to figure out that the compromises are getting faster, and we're actually getting better, which is great. I couldn't probably say that 4, 5, 6 years ago as the cyber criminals really ramped up and we got aware now that we were being under siege and attacked day to day. But we're not good enough. They're getting faster than we're getting faster, right? And this is a dangerous trend that we really need to think about and worry about in terms of the security of our data, healthcare data, credit card data, right? But also now as we move into IoT, a lot of the actual health and safety of the human beings working around some of those devices. The compromisers took minutes to compromise in most cases, but it really took minutes to days. And I guess the bottom line here is the worrying statistic that we see. So we know that compromises are as quick as a script can run or a malware, piece of malware, a fish can get through your email systems. But it's the bottom line that's the one that's concerning to me, because I believe in the past that this graph was shifted farther to the right. Even if they could get in quickly, the time it takes for them to find your data, locate their data, pivot around your environment, get the data in a spot or a position that they can get it out of your environment, and then actually get it out of the environment, which is tough, right? The exfiltration was much larger. So now I think we're seeing an interesting gap there between the minutes and the days, right? It either is very easy for them to get out, or it takes a little bit of time for them to get out. But I firmly believe that if we look at the data breach next year report and we see this information, we'll see that graph, that bar chart on the bottom, slide to the left. Again, more concerning. The attackers are getting better, and hasn't seemed to be any cessation in what they're doing. How do these things get into our environment? Again, the breach report helps us figure it out. What other way does anyone in the world have to get into your environment? Well, everyone's got an email address, and yeah, we do a lot of filtering now, and there's a lot of advanced technologies on email, which is good. But again, all you need to do is send a link. Links are easy to make. We'll talk about that in a little bit later, a little bit more detail later. As well as either send a link or, take a watering hole attack. Get your victim to go to a website. If you get them to the website, well, you can do pretty much anything you want there. And we'll again see why that's the case in a couple seconds. So as I was putting together this slide, this top graph, this chronograph that we have at the top there is the number of flash vulnerabilities, or sorry, flash compromises and the age of those vulnerabilities seen in malware. So the malware using flash vulnerabilities, and that's the age and years of the vulnerabilities in flash that were seen in the wild. And I want everyone, again, this is probably, I'm dealing with people of my generation, I want in your head to think of the Flash Gordon movie, Flash, right? You know, those numbers are past 2 years for many of these vulnerabilities. But, you know, attackers will continue to use vulnerabilities that work. In my daily role at Tanium, we go into a lot of customers and we were able to do some hygiene sort of visibility assessments with customers, and we see the number of missing flash patches that are you know, available for any attacker in the world to just go ahead and nail that particular machine. And we know Flash is vulnerable. We see all the RCEs come out for Flash every month or every couple of months. They're trying to get better, but it's a very vulnerable piece of application, and it's not the only one. So we need visibility across that. Bottom left that you see here, the 99.9, that's actually, there's another 9 in there. The exploited vulnerabilities were compromised more than a year after the CVE was published. This should be no surprise for you, for those of you who are dealing with mass malware that's using exploits to get around your environment once they get in, that you're still seeing things like Conficker roam around your environment. Yeah, so some people's heads just exploded, right? Yes, we still see Conficker running around in people's environments. Yes, I apologize. I'm sorry. I did not write Conficker, but the individual responsible will be punished. The FBI, this is a new stat. Actually, as I was compiling this, this came out just a couple weeks ago. The FBI actually just recently said in a statement, no 0 days were used in any high-profile breaches over the last 24 months. In fact, whenever they've been called in to investigate with a company, what they found was poor cyber hygiene. Poor cyber hygiene was responsible. You ask the company for a network map or some information about their environment, and they're unable to be able to provide that information even when the FBI is asking, right? And this is an FBI quote. Again, this is like, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think the problem is illuminated. Looking at all these malware exploits, you know, this comes as no surprise to anyone that's in an IR sort of business in the room here today. Hashes are volatile. Hashes don't stick around. So this is a graph of the number of hashes and the number of days after the initial time from which they were seen. And this is not even a long tail. This is a trickle that, you know, doesn't reach the ocean, right? So hashes are used once. Malware writers have gotten very good at their script kiddie like packers to go ahead and make new hashes every single day. Yet, all right, now brace for it here. Again, those of you who have not seen this particular movie I'm referencing, why do we still use hashes as the most leading indicator that we want to look for in the environment? And bonus drink, I'll buy a free drink to anyone who can give me the line that goes along with this. Some people are over 35. Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes. I didn't want on video me to be saying the S word. My employer would not like that. Anyway, why do we continue to think that these are still good indicators, right? And trust me, they are an indicator. They're an indicator of something, right? But they're almost always so fragile that if you scan for them once and you don't see them, don't scan for them again, right? And I know that a lot of people use hashes in their daily work, and it's great, and continue to use them. It's fine. Let's just not rely on them so much. I guess is what I'm saying here. So. I know I'm mixing my references here, but I had to put this in because I thought this was pretty cool. This is what we think we're up against, right? I shouldn't say most. I don't want to be that way. A lot of organizations worry about the Star Wars attacker. They worry about alien technology coming down from another planet with a 0 day that's referencing Stuxnet and PLC data, and they're going to get you via some amazingly targeted attack that involves like 007 and some spy, poison, right? Again, wait for it. Here's what we're really up against. Literally, this is pretty much what we're up against, right? We're up against a password of 12345, right? And I know all of you are probably pretty irritated. We're all security professionals in some way or another, right? And it's been so many years. What are we doing here, right? And there's been other talks like this. I've attended them. I've been a lot of different conferences, and I think first time here at GrrCon, by the way. This is awesome. I love the vibe here, and I will be back next year. So let's turn towards what we can do about that, right? Security today is broken. We see a lot of detections. So there's a lot of tools that we see people using. And there's a lot of things that come out of those tools. A lot of times you'll see, if you go into customer environments like me, you see tools get put into the environment, the logs spool off the disk, and all you're doing is creating transistor heat in a data center. All right, no one's ever looking at them, not even automated, not even manual. It's tough to hunt and look at scale, and these are just general problems, right? It's tough to remediate at scale. People are very worried. You talk about patching, and there's legitimate concerns around patching, right? There's legitimate concerns about breaking things, and but there's a reason why we have to patch, and we have to get a lot better at doing it and make it more of a focus. And there's a high barrier to really operationalize security, again, because of the need for uptime in the environment. So what can we do? We can move to plaid mode, which I think is the obvious choice. Everyone here in this room would have said it who's over 35. Really, it starts with knowing yourself, and that's why the title of this talk. SANS published the guideline for how to start in security in an enterprise, in a company environment, even a home environment, really. I mean, think about it, right? They said it 20 years ago, and the first 4 are the most relevant ones, and they remain so today. And I think there's a lot of misguided focus on other things if a company doesn't even have some of these other areas covered. The first one is inventory of authorized and unauthorized assets. Know what you have. Even what you don't have a management agent on today, know what you have. Go make an attempt to go figure out what you have. Find those devices and bring them into your management scheme, or if they can't be brought in, segment them, secure them, manage them separately, right? Know what's installed on these assets. Again, once you've got them into your management scheme, once you've found them, again, in my work, we find anywhere between 5 and 20% of assets that we can discover are not known to the company's general IT asset and CMDB systems. Right? We find those for them. Know what's installed. So once you get them managed, you got to know what's on them. And so without being able to have visibility into that, you're chasing a tail, right? You're chasing something that you're never going to find. Find out what your good secure default configuration is for those assets, and come up with something that you can push out and roll out as a baseline across the board. There's no need for you to boil the ocean there. As we've seen with a lot of these attacks, there's very simple solutions to breaking most of the attackers' attempts to get into your system. Interrupt that kill chain with some very simple configurations. And there's some things that have been out there for a long time that I think companies are just underusing in terms of like base OS configurations that would help. Again, it does take work. I'm not trying to downplay that. It's hard, but the focus is for companies should be around doing some of those hard things more efficiently, better, and as a standard process. And lastly, you have to continually update your vulnerability assessment and management framework. New things happen inside of company environments all the time. You're never going to have a static company environment. You're never going to have a static environment on the network, on the endpoints, wherever you're doing. The employees are always going to bring in those cool new toys they got for Christmas and decide that the wireless network is what they're going to do. Come up with ways to find out where those devices are on your network and to effectively manage and control them if you can. How many companies can really say that they've got these 4 things covered? Again, there's a lot of great tools out there that are above and beyond this, and my company sells some of those things as well, but we also help with that base. But if you don't have these things covered, I think you're missing out a point to start at the base level of security rather than worry about some of these Star Wars attacker threats that are coming out. Why? I love this. Sir, it seems to be jammed. This was such a dumb movie. That was such great comedy. So shadow IT, maintenance Windows, why has this been so hard? I mean, there's a million reasons. I love those pesky users, that are trying to do their job, right? And many times shadow IT and pesky users go hand in hand, and users got to get the job done, right? Your job as a security professional is to help, get those users into a secure configuration as fast as possible, or make sure your company's processes for the standard configuration work efficiently so that they don't have to do shadow IT. Shadow IT comes about because people can't go through and don't want to go through the laborious bureaucracy of the standard IT organization to get things done. And their job is just to get things done, right? They're trying to make widgets, they're trying to make planes, they're trying to make other things, right? They just want to get things done. After you've done these things, what you want to do is you want to shift the balance over to the attacker. Put the onus on the attacker. We've heard, the Michigan and Canadian hockey reference, right? Security is being a goalie with 10,000 attackers. Right? That's true. They only need to get through once, and then, your job is hard. You really want to force the adversary, though, to work as hard as possible. Talking about those base security concerns will make the adversary work harder to get in your environment. so that they have to do things that maybe make noise on the network, right? And those noises that you can see, either through threat of indicator type scanning, or from hunting at scale, or from, perhaps even your prevention solution will flag, utility that they used in desperation to try to do something like escalate their privileges and rights. That has to be a continuous process. It really can't be something that you do and then you do it quarterly, right? It's not that. And even I hear a lot of smaller companies as well say, well, no one wants to attack us. No, they don't really want to attack you. But guess what? Their malware got through to your environment, and they're going to now take advantage of it. And it's either disruption to your environment, your business use, or it's actually they're going to go find in an automated way the things that are in your environment that they can steal, such as your health data, such as some of your, if you have any PCI data, credit card data, right? They're going to get you small or big. And actually, we saw some data published a number of years ago that's showing that actually nonprofits and smaller companies were more frequently targeted actually than bigger companies, mostly owing to the fact that there's more of them than bigger companies. Some of the security basics, and I'm going to start with the second one, two-factor. That's a basic security control, and it's necessary today. Let's move away from two-factor using SMS. Go take a look at any of the recent security blogs from people that have been nailed and hacked with SMS-based. There was just a great one actually last week talking about some of the ways that an attacker called Verizon, impersonated them, got their phone number, actually ported over to another carrier, and then started abducting. It was Coinbase that had that attack. Bitcoin marketplace that you could go to and buy and sell Bitcoin exchange. And they actually ported over his number to another provider. So they actually thought they had the breach fixed, or the attempt at the breach fixed the day before, but the porting of a phone number takes overnight in that case. And so the next day, it happened all over again, and this time they were able to get in and do no damage, but they were actually able to make some progress via that. So two-factor, use push-based technology, or OTP, which is also very secure. Just a basic security control that I see a lot of companies focusing on a lot of very advanced type of techniques for attack, defenses, and they don't have two-factor authentication. It's really surprising. We talked about patching, segmentation, bash and host, do all the basic things. Intel gathering. So your internal environment is the best place for threat intelligence that you could possibly ask for, right? So make processes within your environment. You may have an IT security team, you have an IT operations team under there that's working with some of these teams. They see a lot of the threats, and yeah, a lot of them are based on antivirus, right? But not all of your hosts have antivirus, right? We're going back to that standard across the board. Have them bring some of that threat intelligence that they see internally in, and ask them more than just the hash or the file name or whatever. Ask them what the thing was doing, or have them give you a sample if you have a team that's able to safely decode that without loosing a dragon inside of your own environment, right? Seen that happen a couple times. Most relevant threat data comes from inside your environment. If you have a malware sandbox, hook that up to whatever you can use to scan your environment for IOCs. Your industry peers are the next best friends. So especially as your enterprise grows larger and you're part of an industry, find your friends in that industry. You'll find, I think, that most security people, maybe the lawyers get involved, but you can have some conversations with your security peers at other companies, and that's okay. You're facing the same threats that they are. It's not a competitive advantage necessarily, in your product line for you both to be able to share some threat intel data, and most places are starting to come to that realization. And lastly, go look at an external threat feed. There's a lot of excellent feeds out there that you can use. Combine that with the tool and utility internally that you can allow to actually scan your environment and utilize that threat feed data. All the better, right? So let's talk about threat feed data here just for a couple seconds. The data that you get from threat feeds is maybe useful information, right? But unless you can actually turn it into actionable intelligence, it's really devalued into your company. And what I mean by actionable intelligence, it means taking that data that you find in that threat feed, or that, again, internally generated threat intelligence, and then moving that into actually figuring out what's in your environment, do the analysis on it, understand what the attackers are doing with that particular threat, and try to be actionable about that data. Data without analysis is nothing, right? It's useful, it's in terms of your mental understanding maybe, but it doesn't actually translate into actionable intelligence that you can take to your environment to go find out whether those things are actually existing within your environment or not. So really, during the incident response process, you really want to reduce the exposure window, you want to limit the scope, and you want to cut that kill chain as quickly as possible. You've all heard that kind of stuff, right? I think the piece of that that's missing is really the closed loop cycle of using lessons learned during those cycles to go push that data and intelligence back into the other aspects of your environment and relearn and bring that back into the initial phase, right? If you look at that circle that I painted on the screen earlier, that really IR lifecycle is a lifecycle with a continuous improvement loop. That means that, find an actionable piece of information that says that you're missing patches throughout your environment or a specific patch that an attacker is using. You got to make sure that gets fed back into, whether it be your security team, your operations team, or whatever team, to make sure that that's remediated and closed, right? Use the attacker's behaviors, their procedures, right, to then loop back and use that to generate your own threat intelligence based on your previous knowledge of the threat techniques. And again, this is going past, I'm going to go to the next slide here, this is going past hash values and IP addresses and domain names, right? This is the stuff there, it's bulk scanning, and it's great to do if you have the ability to do it without any sort of impact to your environment. But the more you can move up this pyramid, this is David Bianco, who's a security researcher, and this is one of my favorite. My colleague gave me this slide, and I loved it. I just had to show it. Right? You move up that pyramid of pain. The higher you go up that pyramid of pain, the better results you're going to get. The more effective threat intelligence translation that you're going to get, and you're going to be able to root out attacks that your antivirus or next-gen antivirus or your fancy space, Star Wars, Spaceballs, lasers is going to miss. Right? And there's always going to be some things that get through every prevention technology that you see out there. You're going to be prepared to make sure that you see it, and you see it quickly because you've seen other attacks. Once they get in, the way that they get in is going to change. What they do once they get in tends to be the same, right? So, and as you look up that pyramid of pain, it's what they tend to do rather than what they use to do it. That's all I have. I'm interested if there's any thoughts and comments or any questions that anyone has. Yes, sir. I do not. So my employer does not have that in its space. We help you understand what your network looks like and what your endpoints look like, but I'm not a consultant in that space. So I've worked in my previous role. I worked for one of the large antivirus companies, and so I did some on-site consulting with an automotive customer in Detroit, where we went down the path of understanding what that does, how that helps. So I know some things about it, but I don't do it myself. Yeah. This entire talk was it's easy to say that it's hard to do. But that's the thing, like we have to focus on the hard to do. Because guess what? The easy things, it's not working. Is it? We see breaches every day, we see credit cards being stolen every day, health data being stolen every day, and now we're moving into that really weird area where we're starting to see the integration and symbiosis of IoT, of movable things, of machinery in the world, and data. And that's frightening. I come from a land of working on PLCs and IoT-type devices in car plants. And to think that a machine could be controlled remotely, a welding robot, and swing around and hit its operator, it's pretty scary. Yes, sir. Sure. Yeah, the question was taking the lessons learned that you learned. Would that be something like updating the plan that you have, your incident response plan, or any other type of document you have? It can be. It can be updating the procedures that you and your IR team use internally to accommodate the new ways that some of the threats are coming at you, or it could just be as tactical as taking the information that you've seen, the threats and methods of that particular attack, and feeding that back into the tooling you use to look for those attacks in the future. It really needs to be all of those things. Thank you for your time.